Welcome to Becoming a Successful Writer in TV in a Crowded Landscape. This is a panel at Afro Comic Con, the virtual 2020. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Bianca Sams. I am one of the moderators. Liz Benjamin is our second moderator. While we have you, we have a little bit of PSA we want to say. We hope that you'll please consider donating to the AFCC Moonshot Junior program that funds young girls of color to go through a 12-month program where they will learn tech skills, innovation, product development, and entrepreneurship. So please, please, please click the donation link. Any amounts will help us, and there will be more information on the Afro Comic Con website. Hi. Hey, Liz,
Hi.
how you doing?
I'm good. Hi, guys. So we're going to start off by introducing ourselves and talking about how we got into television, and then we'll kick it to you guys. So Bianca, you want to take it?
I had a weird, I guess slightly weird, maybe not. I was an actor and then doing theater, and I became a playwright. I went to graduate school, happened to have a really great professor who was a playwright, TV writer, who told me to take a look at TV. I applied my last year in grad school to the Warner Brothers program, and that is what brought me to LA 2 weeks before that program started. So I slept on a bunch of couches and did the do for a year, and it's 5 years later and I'm still working in TV, and it's kind of amazing. How about you, Liz?
Well, I have, I think, the beginnings that every writer has. I was a modern dancer. And that I started, like literally, I was a professional modern dancer, and I had written poetry and short stories and journals as a kid. My mother was an English major. And wait, let me just read this chat. Oh, okay. Bianca, do you want to mention, should we edit that back, Norman? Okay, so I'll just keep going. I started as a modern dancer. Like I said, I was a writer. As a kid, I wrote short stories, poetry, journals. My mom had been an English major, and she was always saying that I would be a writer, but I was a dancer, and that's all I wanted to do from the time I was 7 on. So I did that. I got injured, and then I thought I'll create theater dance pieces for myself, like Peanut Bausch or something. So I got into a graduate acting program to pursue that. Did have a master's in theater, got out, decided I didn't want to act, that all I wanted to do was write, and started writing plays in New York. And things just happened very quickly with the playwriting. But then about 4 years into it, I realized I needed to make some money, and television looked great. So I ended up becoming an intern for an executive producer. There were very few shows in New York, but there was this one executive producer who had started on a Sidney Lumet show. And I had an in with him, and I became the intern that I assisted his assistant for free, like 3 days a week. And that was how, but he promised me that if I gave him that, he would teach me everything he knew about television. He became my mentor, and he gave me my first job, and it was a cop script, and that's how I got into Law and Order. So it's a roundabout way, but currently I'm writing on the Netflix show Dead to Me, and we're in our final season. And I also did a stint on Bridgerton, Shonda Rhimes' new Netflix show. I just finished that up before I jump back into Dead to Me. So those are the current things I'm doing, plus I'm developing 2 projects. So
awesome. Since I guess we're supposed to say toot our horns.
Yeah.
I guess I should. I'm currently on Charmed, and before that I was on Titans. And this summer I'm really excited. The show I did for Quibi is out, and it's called Don't Look Deeper, and that was really cool. Before that I did the original. So I've done a couple things. It's been really great. I'm developing a couple things and writing a feature. So I think after that, we can kind of toss it to our lovely panelists to introduce themselves and answer. What's the first question, Liz?
The first question is, basically, everybody has a story about how they broke into television. And why don't you tell us, give us the Reader's Digest version of how you broke into TV, in that. Okay. So why don't we start with Mercedes? Why don't you tell us how you got into television?
Okay, well, before this all happened, I was a lawyer. And the thing, you should do, be professional. But it took being miserable doing that to make me realize I should follow my dream. And that always been a writer, but I never thought I could actually do that. So, just being a constant student too, like I have many degrees, I decided to go to school for a summer at NYU to see if I actually liked screenwriting. And I got good feedback, and it was hard, but I enjoyed it. So it was a string of like workshops, classes, and then the biggest thing for me was getting into the National Hispanic Media Coalition Television Writers Program. It's a mouthful. And that was the first big validation I had for me. And that kind of, things sprung off from there. Someone in a writing group I had with the NHMC programs alums got me on Elena of Avalor just because she liked my writing and my notes. And that was my first job in animation. And I kind of been doing animation ever since. And right now, I'm currently writing for like 5 shows, but I can only talk about Polly Pocket, which is I'm freelancing for. And I freelanced for season 2, and now I'm freelancing for season, oh, well, maybe I can't say. But anyway, so, and I'm also developing 2 projects. So.
Polly Pocket has a show. Wait.
Yes,
Where is it?
It does. You can watch it on Netflix right now, season 1.
Oh my
Awesome.
God. I do that immediately. That's my weekend.
Well, Kate, since you're talking, why don't you tell us how you broke into television?
As I jump in. Crap, how did I do this? I went to USC. I grew up in the Bay Area, Castro Valley, woo. And I went to USC. I was a cinema and English double major. I wanted to write like novels. Apparently you're supposed to move to Seattle to write novels, and I didn't do that. I just stayed in LA and was like, hey, TV and film, this seems really fun. I love action movies. I love action adventure, sci-fi kind of thing. So I just started fumbling around in that. I began in development, actually, went from intern to assistant to CE, and then I realized I wanted to be on the other side of the table and be a writer. So I worked for a while for Ed Solomon, who did Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures, which just came out, which is so awesome. And he was a great mentor. And then I just kind of found my voice during that time and just started churning out scripts, got reps, and I landed on Titans, which is where I met Bianca as a staff writer a couple of years ago. I'm on my 2nd year now for Titans season 3. And it's just been amazing ever since. I'm really, really happy with where I landed. It was sort of stop and go for a while there, but it's been a lot of fun, and I've met a lot of amazing people.
Cool. Maya, how about you? How'd you?
So I was born in Atlanta, Georgia, raised by a single mom, and I kind of knew I always wanted to write ever since I was 5 years old, and I wrote a poem in the point of view of one of the 3 blind mice about how bleak and meaningless life was. And it got me my first award from like the school's writing competition, and probably my mother's eternal worry that I should be in therapy. But the choice to like pursue television really solidified one day when I was sneakily watching my mom's favorite show of all times, Grey's Anatomy. And I learned that Shonda Rhimes was a Black woman. And that was life-changing to me because I had no idea Black girls could do that. I was like, wait, we can do that? And my mom said she did it. And so I was like, great, that's what I want to do. And so every moment after that led to that dream of mine. I attended an arts high school where I studied creative writing to hone the craft. I participated in summer film programs such as Vanderbilt and NYU. And then I moved to LA to attend USC undergrad in writing for screen and television. And upon graduation, I won a writing contest hosted by Issa Rae and Project Greenlight. And the prize was getting to create a digital series with Issa as the executive producer. And after that amazing experience was done, I dabbled a bit into agency life. It wasn't for me. My heart wasn't in it. It just wasn't creative, and it made me miserable, honestly. So I would wake up, I would check the trades, check Deadline and Hollywood Reporter, and I'd see what shows are getting renewed or what are getting ordered. And I would cold email executive producers, but I didn't actually know what their email addresses were. So I would like do different variations of their names to try to email. So I'd be like, first name, last name at Gmail, last name, first name at Gmail. I was just so desperate to like get into a writer's room. And I sent out my resume and a very professional plea about giving me a chance, and 99% of them bounced back because they weren't actual email addresses. But one landed in the inbox of the showrunner of The 100. So I joined them as the writer's PA for season 5. And then I went on to be the writer's PA for Arrow on the same network, CW, for season 7 and 8. In the final season of Arrow, my showrunner gave me an episode, my first episode of television. And as I wrapped up on Arrow, I was grateful to be chosen as a fellow for NBC Writers on the Verge class of 2019-2020. And after that, I got reps. I went through my first staffing season, and now I'm currently on Batwoman as a staff writer. And now I'm here.
Great, you guys, those are great stories. Yeah. Bianca,
I just think it's so great.
Yeah.
It's so great because everybody's way of getting here is so different, right? Like some of us went through the PA route and the assistant route, and some of us went through programs. Other people, you know, we get different places in different ways, and that's really exciting how that switches. So hopefully people who are watching recognize that like there's no one way to get into Hollywood. There's no one way to become a TV writer. We all figure out where we are when we are. So the second question we have on the agenda today is like, so when we think about our careers, right? Then when we first started, you know, whether a PA or not, it's like, what are the things, right? What are some of the things you wish that you didn't do? And then think about some things that you wish you had done. And if you have any regrets that can keep somebody else from making the same mistake, what are some advice that you might give other writers who are trying to either break in or are currently in the business right now?
Do you?
Liz,
Oh, you want
me
to
tell yours?
Oh, okay. Well, you know, I thought about this a lot, and I think one of the things that I did early on was, as a playwright, I felt very sure of my voice. I didn't need somebody to tell me whether something was working or not. I knew it. I felt it. It was in me. Then I got into television, and I felt like I knew nothing. I felt like I didn't know anything. I gave all my power away. I felt like everybody knew everything, and I hadn't gone to school for writing. You know, I just felt so early on. I gave my power away in situations. I wish I hadn't done that. And there's one incident that I regret, that I do have a regret on. It was my first script for Bones. And I'd had 2 seasons on Law & Order Criminal Intent. But when I did this script, I felt really good about it. I felt like I was in there and I was doing all the things that I had wanted to do. And I felt like the script was really working. And one of the co-EPs gave me notes. And I took every single note. And I turned to my script that I was so proud of. And it was so creative and so fun and so the voice of the show, I felt. And I turned it into this dull piece of crap. I mean, dull. There was no pinging. There was no springing into the next scene. There was no energy. And I thought, oh, he knows what he's doing, right? And I don't. And my boss was like, what is this? And I just cried. I was so angry at myself, I just started crying. But I wish that I had more of a belief in my own inner compass. I think it's really important to really not be arrogant, but think about a note. Does it make sense? You know, especially when you're starting out, it's important to not give your power away, but to learn and to be very open to learning. So that's me.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I love that because it's like, sometimes you have to look for the note behind the note, where it's like, I have a problem with this thing, and you got to figure out what it is their problem is, and then figure out your way of analyzing it, and then putting in the script that still feels like you, that you don't feel like you dulled down the project that you're creating for somebody else's notes. When I think about that question, I am always about the internet, and thinking about some of the mistakes. We live in a world of digital things, and sort of the things I saw. And it wasn't necessarily my regret, but it was a regret because I took part in it. I think it was like the third or fourth show I was on. My boss, it was fun, wanted to take pictures around the office, and we were all doing these crazy things, and it was really, really fun. But one of the pictures had the board in the background, and it was really blurred if you looked at the picture, and you could literally barely see it in the regular picture. But I don't know what filters people put it through. I don't know what people did to like spotlight and figure it out, but they figured out what was on the board, which at that point had been weeks old. And it was a mess. It was 20 minutes of us having fun with my boss. You know, I'm a staff writer. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then 20 minutes later, Twitter's crazy. They're getting death threats. They're getting like things sent to the office. And so it quickly made me understand the power of the internet and how careful you need to be about when you're taking pictures, what you're doing, what you're putting out on the internet. Because in that situation, I was the staff writer. So, you know, I didn't know any better. But really, it really made me conscious of sort of making sure that what I'm putting out or what I'm putting up is stuff that I can stand behind, be okay with. And then I'm not worried about my safety or anybody else's safety, but also just having fun, but like making sure I'm conscious that when you put something out there, it's not just like to one or two people, it's out there and it's out there forever. So I think, you know, for new people or even seasoned people, making sure that we're aware of sort of our internet presence and sort of what we're letting the world know or not know about our lives. So that's the only sort of weird regret I think I had from those first couple of shows. Maya, what about you? Do you have any regrets or like cool things that you think that you would want to do now that you didn't do then?
Yeah, I think I 100% agree with you. I feel like a couple of us are on very like fan heavy shows. And I love fandom. I started off as a fangirl, but I've realized that I have to be very careful about what I like, what I don't like, what I tweet and stuff like that to make sure it doesn't seem like I'm ever like biased to one towards the other. But one thing that I think I regret most that I didn't do actually was I wish I'd spoken up for myself more when I was first starting off. Starting even from USC, like I'm grateful for the opportunities I received at USC, but USC could be quite formulaic and they really kind of just wanted you to go down one path of writing scripts. And I knew from a very early age that I really wanted to do young adult. I wanted to do those kind of things that kind of are frowned upon or like looked as like lesser than, which always frustrated me. And it really took me until senior year to really just be like, no, screw this. I want to write like a new Gossip Girl. I want to write like a new One Tree Hill or whatever like that. And like I had a professor who was like, yeah, do that. But like it took me like 3 years before I actually got comfortable enough to go to that point and like speak up for what I actually wanted to write, and continuing to do so even after I graduated. I've become more comfortable and more confident in myself. But I think starting off, I was just very like, I'm just happy to be here. I'm just going to be very like quiet as a mouse and just whatever. But like that sometimes is at the benefit of my own discomfort. And I realized I had to like learn how to speak up for myself while doing it in a respectful kind of way. So that's something I regret, but hopefully now that I'm learning to start to process now.
That's awesome. That is such a good thing to think about, because I think as writers, and we were talking about this yesterday, Liz, it's like when you're new, especially, and you're in a room, we're all really trying to learn and we're trying to get there, and you're balancing, how do I use my voice for being in the room, and then how do I not seem arrogant, but then how do I not also kill my soul?
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is really a hard balance to make. Mercedes.
Yeah, I have two that are rep related. The first one is something I regret not doing, and that was I didn't get or try to get a rep during the first season of my first show, and that was because someone on the show was like, "Oh, wait till season 2," and I unfortunately did, and then I didn't go back for season 2, and then I'm in the middle of staffing season with no rep. So that's a big regret I have, and still not bitter, not bitter at all. But then my next one is I ended up getting a rep, and they were terrible, and I stayed them for much longer than I should have out of fear, because it felt like that made me legitimate. I had a rep, but I found out that person, like from other people, like that person actively hurt my career. Like people, like meetings I never knew they wanted to meet with me. I had a showrunner in the middle of a staffing meeting stop to tell me your rep sucks. Like That's how bad it was. And that was like, okay, I kind of knew it, but to have someone in the middle of a meeting stop to tell me that, I need to move on. So it's better to have no rep than to have someone who is working against you. So that
Wow. Yeah, that's
those
real
are my
talk.
2 rep lessons.
Yeah.
Kate,
Kate.
how about you?
Totally agree with everything that was said. I've definitely been there as well. But let's see, something I regret not doing. I think for me, it was sort of going up what you were saying, Maya, of just, for me, like writing wise, when I first started writing and just figuring out what I wanted to do, what my voice was, I thought I had to write something important. Like I was an English major, so I was like, I should write drama. I should write the most important thing. And I tried that for a little while. You go through a few different scripts and try different genres and stuff. And I realized that what I really was passionate about was action adventure, you know, like big explosion, like big, like genre fare that, like you said, Maya, you know, like some people might look down on that. But after a few scripts and a lot of failures and stuff, I realized like, I'm just going to write what I want to watch. You know, I love TV, I love movies. I'm just going to write things that I want to see. And the moment I started doing more of that, of just kind of not caring anymore, just going for what I really liked, that's when I started seeing results. That's when my reps started responding, you know, and just, it's not about pleasing everyone. It's about being honest about what makes you excited, because you're going to find the other people who are excited about that thing too, you know? So it's like, even if 10 people, if there's only one other guy who loves, you know, Westerns, and it's like, okay, great, we'll connect and we'll get on a show, and that's how you're going to find the path to success, not trying to appeal to all 9 other people and whatever their tastes are. So yeah, just.
I could not agree more. I've been doing this a long time, and I think it took me a long time to understand that piece of it. I think we as writers are, especially in television, you're sort of brought up to believe that you should be a jack of all trades, right? But I did the showrunner training program at the WGA, and a few of the showrunners that came in said this with different words, but they said, know what you do well, know what you don't do well, and do not pretend to do well at something that you do not do well at. Like, just know your instrument and know who you are. And it's taken me a while to get there, but you're right. You're absolutely right, Kate. Like, that's a really great thing. You know, Bianca, I was thinking that it might be good to talk about, because we're down to like maybe 35 minutes. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
You want to talk about tips and tricks and like this getting ahead
let's talk
business?
a little bit of craft stuff, right? Like,
let's go into craft.
We're in this place where to be able to stand out in a crowd, right? Most people don't think about it. It's like when you write a script and you're writing the thing you love, you're not thinking about necessarily the fact that when the person who's reading it, there might be 100 scripts that your script is being read in the middle of. Or for me, I got into the Warner program, and I think there was something like 3,100 scripts the year I applied. So you're trying to jump out of that pile. You're trying to make your script jump out and be read and people love it. So for you guys, what are some of the things, the tips and tricks to like really think about when you're doing your scripts? So like for me, I always say those first 5 to 10 pages are super important to really like land what your world is, what the story's about, who these characters are, and why we care. Because if they read nothing else, they can see that like they're interested in those first 10 pages. I know that maybe they'll read to 15, maybe they'll get to the end, but even if they only give me 10, they've had impact about like who I am and what I write. So for you guys, like what are some things you think about when people are trying to stand out? Again, like getting out of the pack, that's really, really, you know, deep. How do you make sure your scripts or yourself stand out in the crowd? So I'm gonna start with Maya.
In the same vein as what you said, Bianca, about the first 10 pages being the most impactful, I think about what every main character, how they're introduced. Because for me, characters make or break a script. I really like to lean into strong characters, not physically, but just characters that you genuinely want to root for. And because I've watched and I've read plenty of pilots to see if I'm going to be into a show or not. I just couldn't root for the characters in any kind of capacity, and that immediately takes me out. And I feel like if the character is dynamic enough, I will watch them sit there and watch paint dry. Like, it's just like, if they're interesting enough, I'll do that. So I think having really fleshed out characters that actually appeal to an audience is something that's very important, something that I try to incorporate into my own work.
That's awesome. I mean, because character is what it's all about, right? That's why we watch shows and all of that stuff.
I mean, my best friend who's a writer is very plot over character. And so we always clash because I'm like, but what is she doing? And then he's like, but the plot is so cool. I'm like, yeah, the plot's cool, but she's like not anything. And so then like, we're like, it has to be a balance, which is something that I'm learning, especially being in my first writer's room. But I always will be character over plot any day.
Well, can I just jump in? I just want to say that plot is the part of writing that people can learn, right? That we can learn how to plot. We can learn there are rules and tricks and tips and all kinds of books written about it. But character is passion, and it's personal, and it's what makes you excited to write this story or to get inside that person's skin and go through the story through their eyes. I mean, I think you're spot on, Maya. Yeah, like Mercedes, how about you? Like, what for you, tips, tricks?
Well, a lot of the things I wanted to say were already said, but I think for me, I think the scripts people respond to most of mine, the people call them authenticity, because it has it, you know, I may not be like a ghost catching teenager or something, but like that character has a part of me in her. So, and it just feels more real just because it won't, like, you know, play by play be my life as a teenager recreated, but like there's certain moments, certain feelings that like I'll put into my scripts. And actually what I'm kind of referencing to, I didn't realize I was doing at the time, actually. I just was like doing it. And then when someone asked me years later where you got this idea from, I realized like, oh my goodness, this was, you know, me as a teenager when wish fulfillment, you know, when my grandmother passed, you know, like, so it was just one of those, you know, things that just I did subconsciously. And I think that script is the one that I get, I guess, the warmest response to, you know, if people like genre, because that's another problem too. It is a genre thing, so some people, whatever. But like, that's the one they like, or the most warmest. Even though my other ones are usually funnier, but that one's like has the most heart, I guess. That's what I'm saying. So
heart is a thing that you really lean into in your scripts.
Sometimes, just because like I also have some comedy stuff that people like, but it just depends. I'm mixed and I'm many things in my life, and so is my writing, and so it depends. Like, so for that one script, like that was like, this is about an homage to my grandmother, and then other ones are just like, you know, I love vampires and I love comedy, so this is going to be a vampire dramedy, you know. So it's shifting sands for me. But I just think for a more universal audience, I think heart gets, you know, more likes for me.
I love that. Kate, what about you?
Tips and tricks. I totally agree with everything that's said. I'm trying to think of what else. For me, in my scripts, I try to do something in those first 10 pages that you say, Bianca, for 10 pages for TV, and certainly within the first 15 pages for features. I try to do something that will surprise the reader, and I don't, not necessarily like, you know, an explosion or a car crash or anything like that, but like something that's shockingly authentic from your main character. And that could be, you know, a villain who has an amazing relationship with, you know, his mom or his wife or whatever, or the hero has, you know, an unexpected, you know, just thing going on in his life, like just some moment, small emotional moment that kind of catches the reader off guard and really pulls you in. If you can hit that emotional beat and catch people off guard, they'll be with you for the rest of the story, I think. And yeah, so just trying to find that authenticity, like you were saying, Mercedes, of if you can find that one honest moment right away in the script, you're usually coming off the right foot. So
I love that. Liz, what about you?
Well, to stand out of, I mean, I feel like everything that everyone's saying are things that I fully believe in. It's been a long time since I've written a spec to try to, like, you know, get work or get noticed, but I always feel like, for me, what is my feeling and connection to the material? And you know inside when it's just, my tip is, do not write what you think people want. I mean, we hear it all the time. Just don't do it. It is such a waste of time. You're not even into it when you're doing it. You're just trying to fill, you know, some assignment for yourself. Like, don't do it, do not do it. I can't say that enough.
I am with you.
Write what you want to see. Write the show you want to be on. put your heart and soul into that. I think for a spec that I wrote that gets a lot of great response is a spec that I wrote that was a combination of The Sopranos and Breaking Bad and 6 Feet Under and all these shows that I wanted to write on. I thought, I'm just going to make a show that encompasses all the things I love and want to do. And I did, and people were like, who'd you write this for? Like, and I was like, for myself. But that's my tip. And
I love that.
Did you do yours? Bianca?
I don't know that I didn't. I mean, I kind of did, but I didn't. I mean, what I love about what you're saying is that you're really having to write for your own heart, because you don't know who's reading this, right? And you don't know if they're going to like it or not. It's all very subjective. But if your heart is on the page, if what you love is on the page, and the people the parts of you are on the page, I think it connects beyond any plot. It connects beyond any story. And that's what people watch TV for. I mean, I've often heard the write what you know sort of thing. And as a person who categorically does not write about my own life, I always hate that piece of information, because I think what you know can change. I do research-based projects. I will research the hell out of it, but I tend to write them as if it were my life. Meaning, if I wanted somebody to write about me and respect me and respect who I am, I give that same respect to my characters, to whatever I'm researching and writing about, as if it were my own, right? And if somebody was writing it for me and continuing to sort of stay in that space, and maybe that's some of it having been an actor before, right? I know what it's like to have to embody another character and sort of figure that out. And so when I moved into writing, I sort of took that same respect that I feel like as an actor you have to give to characters, to the same thing when I was writing, to make sure that that sort of lived in both worlds. And no matter what genre it's in, no matter if it was comedy or drama or dramedy or dark, which I love, and blowing up things, if the characters sing, I think it always kind of stands out. We're talking a little bit about craft, and I want to shift really quickly because it's not lost on me that everyone on this lovely panel are women. Hello, ladies. But also that we're all mostly TV writers, right? We might write film, we might also write other things, but TV is a very particular beast, right? And what most people don't know is that you spend 8 to 10, sometimes 12 hours a day in a writer's room with anywhere between 8 and 14, 15 people talking about story nonstop, day in, day out. But an issue that constantly comes up in those writers' rooms is that there's sometimes those landmine conversations, those real difficult conversations, whether it be about religion or gender or race or politics. And you have to figure out how do you say your piece without losing your mind, and how do you stay professional without losing your job. And that is a very difficult thing for people to learn. But if you're going to be successful and continue to be successful in this business, you really have to figure that out. And Liz has probably had more stories than the rest of us because she's amazing and has done so many shows. Liz, for you, like, what has that been? Like, I'm sure you've dealt with misogyny both with characters and for self in a room. Like, how do you handle those situations that feel like hot coals?
Well, I think that how I handle them now and how I handled them then are two different things. I talked about how I usurped my own voice. I didn't own my power. But now I'm very protective of other writers. I'm a mom. I have 2 kids. When I'm in a room and I see any kind of bullying, even if it's subtle microaggression, I do call it out. I don't do it in front of anyone in the room. Unless it's warranted, then I'll be like, hey, uncalled for, or I will put a stop to it. But I will call people. Like I've called a second who was running a room and had to explain something that I was noticing, and said, we as the upper level writers have to do better. Like, this is not acceptable. And I feel like I'm now very comfortable with that, but I wasn't. And I think it's such a delicate balance, because we have to be open and be responsive, but we also have to be aware of the herd that we're in, or the tribe. And I don't know. I don't really have a good answer for that.
No, that's a great answer. That's such a great answer.
I want to know, like, Kate, let's ask you, like, have you experienced a difficult situation? You don't have to like get into the nitty gritty of it, but have you had any sort of run-ins or uncomfortable things happening?
Not anything in that really leaps out at me in particular, but yes, I mean, I for me, it's because I write in a genre, you know, like action, that is very male dominated. And for me, though I try to approach it, if I hear a comment or anything, in my personal experience, it's usually more born out of ignorance than any kind of like straight up, you know, misogyny. So I'll try to come from a place of forgiveness and sort of like pointing out like, hey guys, you know, like, why does this character have to always be a man? You know, these whatever mobsters or something like that. Like, there's women who can do this. Like, what if we tried this? Sort of looking at it as an opportunity to push ourselves, like you said, of like, hey, we can be better, guys. Like, I know that, especially in like a writer's room, or even just like in meetings and stuff, in interviews and things like that, like we're all trying, I think everybody in Hollywood is trying to do better and trying to push ourselves. So I think sort of a gentle calling out, but like as a team, instead of like an accusatory thing, like I think that helps, and it usually has a good response. People go, oh yeah, you're right, you know, like we should do this, and it feels different, and we have a great, you know, opportunity. And so yeah, I try to come at it from sort of a positive of like, we're all in this together, kind of thing. And so far it's worked, so we'll see.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, positivity goes so far.
Yeah.
What is that saying? You get more with a spoon of honey than you do with
Yes.
vinegar. But you just have to hope that is coming from that space, and if it's not, other people are gonna be so happy that you at least tried to come from that place.
Yeah,
you know, sometimes you can't do it, sometimes you can. Maya, what about you? What are your thoughts?
I am very grateful to currently be a part of a writer's room that genuinely values my voice and what I have to say. We're writing a show about a Black queer woman who becomes a superhero. So they have really expressed to me that it's important and needed for me to speak up about the multiple facets of this character that I personally can relate to in ways that others can't. And they're like that for any of our characters and any of our writers that are from different walks of life and backgrounds. But, you know, some days can still be frustrating when you're trying to talk about a specific topic for a multitude of reasons. But I've learned to take a deep breath and write down what aspects are either working or not working for me, so that I can have the most productive conversation to make for the best story, make for the best characters, without it just becoming something where it's like an argument. I just know, like I said before, when I was younger, I didn't speak up as much, but now I'm not shy. I'm not afraid to speak up. I'd rather speak up and know that I did all that I could for a specific story, a specific character, than just be silent. But I just understand that there's a way. I'm from the South, so there's a way to do that without being disrespectful or difficult or any kind of way. So I've learned to get a really good balance of the two. And thankfully, I'm in a surrounding where they're willing to actually listen to that.
Yeah, I think that's really a great point of taking notes, putting down, starting with the positive and being like, these parts are really, really working, and these parts maybe we need to work on, and sort of figuring how that works. Mercedes, what about you?
Let's see. This is it's interesting conversation because, well, animation, it's a little bit different than live action because we have, you know, not just writers to contend with, but then we have artists, storyboard artists, and I've been on different shows now, and I think for my first show, I didn't have any problems on the writing end. But I just think, but sometimes when things went to storyboard, the interpretations of the words sometimes were problematic, because at the time I think we had, like, out of 12 storyboard artists, 10 were men, and so certain things, you know, were problematic, I guess, because someone getting specifics. But I brought them up to both times. I uncovered something. I brought them up to, you know, someone, like the first time I felt I can go straight to the showrunner just because, like, he was there in the meeting. So I was like, wait a minute, what the hell was that?
Yeah.
And then the second time she was like, oh, and she was just so busy, and she was on it right away. So I felt like I could go to those people. I think more recently I've had some stuff this year where, it was a weird power dynamic where I could go to my head writer, but the power discrepancy between her and the showrunner was kind of vast, and he had blind spots to the sexism of some people on the staff. So it was a little bit harder. It's kind of like, okay, well, I guess I don't really interact with those people. But I mean, and I actually, we had talked about it in a meeting and actually called them sexist because people were dancing around the issue. I was like, they're sexist. I mean, because I just didn't care at that point. I was like, we're telling you what's wrong, and you're still like, really? But they're so okay with me. I'm like, because you're a straight white man. That's why they're fine with you, because you're not, women or women of color.
Right.
So yeah, this year I've been a little bit more bold than I have been in past years. But I think that's just because with more experience, and also we're like, just I'm getting older, man. Like I'm not saying I'm old, but I just fewer cares left to give, I guess, is where
the cupboard is starting to be bare. Liz and I were talking a little bit yesterday about like being complicit, right? Like not saying anything when you see something wrong, or you see something, say something. And sometimes I thought like of my job as being a minesweeper, of like I'm not the showrunner, so I can't actually say what goes or doesn't go on the screen, but my job is to sort of look at sort of the landscape we're creating. If there's an image that we are not intending to say, right? Like there's this whole other double thing. Then I was trying to, plant that flag and be like, hey guys, just FYI, this means different things to different people. So maybe we don't do this, or maybe we shade it this way, or here's the stereotype we don't want to deal into. But it's interesting because we're all writers, we're all creatives, we all want to get along. And we don't want to have issues with the people we have to work with day in and day out. And so this is really helpful because I wanted to be able to give new writers or like people who are trying to up their game, just like tips and tricks of like what they could possibly do. Another thing I know I do is I try to find allies in the room. Like sometimes I do not want to be the person who has to be like, okay, black girl problem. I want to be like, hey, I will take this thing if you'll take that thing. Right? Like we will swap issues for the day because it's so much easier than me having to be like, do I really need to say why like the black person shouldn't just be a thug, or the black person should, like somebody else needs to point it out. Or I can take something that has nothing to do with me and minesweep that for the day. So I'm very much about community building and really working with the people in my offices and in my rooms to make sure that they're comfortable, that I'm comfortable, that we're all finding a way to sort of work together. What about you, Liz? I mean, is there other things that people should think about, because we stand out in rooms. We just have to make sure we stand out for the right reasons, not the wrong.
I mean, I think, it's interesting coming from the world of dance, right? Like for me, dancers are ensemble by nature. You're not on stage with 15 other dancers going, they're looking at me, what I'm doing. You're creating a picture together. So that's just the way my creativity developed. That's why acting was not a good fit for me, because I was supposed to be the character and I was thinking about everybody else, so whatever. But I think, Bianca, you're right in terms of that they're not, that your room is your team. And if there is, ego is the death of good. Like ego is the death of anything healthy in a room. And I mean, Hart Hansen on Bones, day one, said, check your ego out the door. Like, just check it. And I'd never heard anybody say anything like that. And I was still such a new writer for television, but it's stuck with me because it's like, he's right. It's the me mentality that destroys the goodwill of the staff. But, I've been in rooms where, I'm a woman and I'm a white woman, but I've been in rooms where like we have black characters and maybe we have one writer of color. And that writer, the pressure on them to be the voice of color is not fair. Like that should not happen, especially if you have leads on the show that are of color. You don't just hire all white men or a whole white room. It doesn't make any sense in today's world. So I think, I'm not really answering a question. so I think we should move on.
No,
I don't want to just talk.
No, here's the thing is, if you're answering the question, because it's like, how do we all move through this world and do it in a way that's healthy? And what you're acknowledging is that like when you are the only in that space, whether it's a person of color or you're one of the only women, part of it is collaboration. Part of it is reaching out to people. Part of it is noticing when there's blind spots and being able to voice it and understand it and at least be there for each other. And to me, that is a standout thing. Like, if you want to be a writer in this industry and be able to have job after job, you have to be like Liz, right? You have to be the person who's like empathetic and really reaching out and protecting other writers and recognizing, oh, maybe there's an extra pressure being put on these people, you know, and if we're all doing that, like, I've been in rooms where, like, I am not a queer person, right? Like, I am a cis het, whatever my niece likes to tell me, woman, and I'm very clear that if there's a LGBTQI character, IA character, and there's one queer woman in the room or a man in the room or trans in the room who do not want to carry that weight today, I will go to them and be like, what do you need me to do? You tell me what you want me to say, and I will be you for the day, and I will take those hits so that you don't have to come in that day and be the person with the pressure, and you can kind of take pressure off each other. And we do that as teams, right? We have about like 10 minutes left, and
I know. I'm thinking that
I know it went so fast.
I know. I'm thinking though, you know, like, television is such a high pressured. Like, once you hit production, regardless of what show you're on, it's like a bat out of hell. It's horrifying, right? And it wreaks havoc on your life. And so I think it's interesting to maybe find out, like, what are ways that you stay motivated, that you hit your deadlines, which is something that I think people who aren't in television are always asking, like, how do you do that? How do you write, like, toward a deadline and things like that? And we were talking about this yesterday, Bianca. What was
you had some really great ones?
Well,
like,
I mean, one tip that I have, but I really am so curious to hear from our panelists. So, but yeah, I'll talk about me later. But let's, like, jump into Maya. Like, when you're are there any tips in terms of the process of writing? One thing I will say this. I've hired writing coaches. I actually hired a writing coach when I had 3 development deals at a staff job and I had no idea how to manage my time. I hired a writing coach to work with me. But anyway, let's go with Maya and, like, give me some of your writing superpower tips.
It's funny because I'm on script right now, so
okay,
this
talk
is
about that.
very on topic. I start every day with a to-do list. Like, I have a very schedule. I really schedule out my weekends when I'm on script or when I need to have to finish a deadline, and so it's very much like, from 12 to 1, I will do this panel. From 1 to 2, I will be working on the speech sheet. And I do a lot of that, and I reward myself. So it's not like I'm just like completely deeply into work and then I don't. So I'm like, oh, I worked for 2 hours. I'm going to order Din Tai Fung for lunch. And oh, I did this for 3 hours, then I will take a walk out and get to cuddle my pet and things like that. So I have kind of a system of, like, gratification that's kind of a slightly delayed so that I can do what I need to do. But I also, like, I get rid of all screens, turn off my phone, stuff like that, besides just music, and really focus on it. But I also think it's important to take care of yourself so you're not overwhelmed and swallowed by it all. So scheduling for me, time management is, like, how I thrive during these times.
Yes, amen. That literally, time management is the most important thing, I think, because we don't have a 9 to 5. We don't have a thing where you clock in and clock out. We have to be very cognizant of our time as both human beings who need to live and breathe, but also as writers and artists. Who do you want to go to next, Liz?
Anybody who wants to jump in? Mercedes, Kate?
I guess I'll jump in. I actually got a physical planner, which has been helpful, and, you know, writing things out and, like, the little to-do list in there. And just for writing itself, I have discovered, even though I should have discovered this a long time ago, that when I get notes on something, like, addressing them, like, not necessarily inputting them right away, but, like, breaking them down and giving my thoughts and, like, where I want to go with stuff as soon as possible, just so when I, you know, have the time to sit down, okay, let me rework this draft or go to the next step. I have, you know, just more of a framework to go off of. So I think that's been a lot more helpful for me writing wise, and meeting the deadlines, which are the bane of my existence. But, yeah.
Do you have some lazy sort of self-care stuff you like to do? Like, things that are easy when you're stressed that people might really like to hear?
I mean, I like martial arts. Back when pre-COVID, I would actually go train because hitting someone or something. I mean, my partner, she can take it, but like sometimes could help with stress. And but other things, like I play games on my phone. Like I avoided them for years, but that's nowadays the easier thing for de-stressing.
Mm. And Kate, how about you?
This is for script and being on deadline. For me, I like to print out, like the outline or the story area or whatever. I put it on the wall, and I sort of, as I go through each scene, I can like slash it off and just get through it and kind of break it down for the amount of time I have. So for me, that just helps me feel more accomplished. And then I just try to get through the vomit draft as quickly as possible, because it's getting that first one that's just like, let it suck. If you have a scene you don't know what to do with, just write it, let it be terrible, and just come back later. It will get better, but you just have to keep going. You have to turn something in. So just go for it, guys.
Yeah,
I love that.
I do too. And then in terms of like motivations for like, or where do you find ideas for your own personal stories? Where are they originally just from inside you? Do you read magazines? Like, where's your inspiration for your personal stories? And why don't we jump back to Kate? Yeah.
For me, I'm sort of a visual person. And so when I am looking for a good story, I look for a character and sort of a situation, will give me like the kind of visual that I want. And once I find kind of that scene that I'm like, this is it, this is sort of, it captures what this tone and the character and the conflicts, that sort of becomes my inspiration. I draw a lot from literary stuff, like the classics, like the Three Musketeers, and Moby Dick and everything. So I think those are great when you sort of find the heart of that, whether it's an emotional part of it or a lead character or just a theme. I'll try and take that and be like, how can I do my version of this? Or how can I adapt this, into modern day or something like that? So yeah, just sort of whatever makes you fall in love with an idea or character, because you're going to probably be working on this for a very long time and you have to keep falling in love with it over and over again. So yeah, that works.
Does anyone else have because we only have a few minutes left, right?
Yeah. I was just thinking I look at the things that I used to love growing up, such as like Buffy and Veronica Mars and One Tree Hill. But they were so white, and I never saw me and my friends reflected back in those characters other than the token characters. And so I write from a place of just like, I love those worlds, but I want to see those worlds that kind of like look a little bit more like what today's society look like.
Wow, yeah.
Especially because I like to say I write for my younger self.
I love that.
I do too. Mercedes, any last thoughts on that?
Well, yeah, I have written stuff off of daydreams that I've had, and just certain ideas or just like certain things will happen in my life that like my mind will take it to a weird sci-fi place or something. So what's around me, or occasionally a song, like lyrics to a song will take me to another place, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should write a movie about that. So,
do you do playlists?
Always.
Sometimes.
I can't write without music. I can't.
It's really cool.
Yeah. So
what about you?
Who?
Liz?
Me?
Liz?
Oh. Yeah. I'm very like, I think it's personal. It's always like a feeling, a sense of a feeling, and then it leads me to a character. But usually it's about like a theme of redemption or something that I'm chasing. And then I'll just keep digging into that. Twyla Tharp has a really good book called The Creative Process. Has anyone read that? She calls it Scratching. It's a great book for writers, dancers, whoever who's creating, but this idea of scratching at an idea, right? Scratching until you get down to the bone of what you want to say.
I have a sticky on my mirror in my bathroom that says, be the change you want to see in the world, right? And whatever version of that means a thing to people, but when we walk into these rooms, we are representatives of underrepresented groups. And so when I think about how I have to walk in, I am very aware of actually being a part of multiple underrepresented groups, right? Like I am a woman, but I'm also a woman of color. I am Black. And so when I walk into these spaces, I have to think about that sometimes of I often say, when I'm in a room, I'm thinking about the woman who's coming behind me. When I'm in a room, I'm thinking of Black person who's coming behind me. When I'm in a room, I'm thinking about the poor person who's going to come behind me, who's like not from a wealthy family. And so I try to present myself in a way that will not hinder somebody being able to come after me, that I am changing the landscape just by being there and being positive and being great at my job, and changing how people might perceive what they think if they haven't met someone of color or somebody who's Black or who's someone from the Bay would think of that. And so what are the positive ways in which we can sort of alter that, and then what are situations that might have been challenging, right?
Yeah, was there a situation in your life that was a watershed moment where you realized you had to, well, we've talked about this before, about speaking up or being in rooms with difficult conversations. Yeah. But have you encountered anything that was a real game changer for you, that when you said, I will not, this is not acceptable, and what's the question? Bianca, help me out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's actually the perfect question, right? Like I had a watershed moment in one of my first rooms when someone, I won't say who, like basically said they believed in segregated rooms and that I didn't belong in the room I was in. And it was very difficult. It was very difficult. And I went there. I was just like, that moment for me, as having family members who were civil rights movement, family members who died trying to register people to vote, like it was the watershed moment that I heard my grandmother's voice in my head that was like, oh no, this is not the day, right? Like, it's like, and so I knew at that moment I had to say a thing, even if it meant that I might get fired. And it was a hard day, but I have thankfully learned that that was not the case, right? The 9 times out of 10, that was not the case. And so for me, I had to quickly learn that's an easy one to deal with, right? Sometimes it was just, we said a line about a character says a line that I'm like, ooh, women wouldn't say that, right? Like, and here's why. And I had to find a way to be able to make the people I had to work with every day just understand how to see things from a point of view that they didn't live through. And it was hard, but it was very much about tact and being able to either pull people aside and not do it in the room or whatever. But like, everybody's had a different experience. So what we will hope is that we can talk to Mercedes, Maya, Kate. How do you handle these sort of situations for yourselves? Have you had to deal with them? How do you present yourself in the room? And what would your point of view be on this sort of general question?
One thing that struck me, it actually didn't happen in a room. It happened at my time at USC when I was in one of the writing classes. It was, I believe, the junior year of my undergraduate year. And we were in the small comedy spec class of 9 students and a professor. And like most class, I was the rare few that was a student of color, and I'm almost always the only Black woman. And while expressing my distaste for how certain shows depended on played out tropes for Black women, my friend turned to me and asked, why do you care so much about this stuff? Like, it doesn't have to be a conversation every single time. And I was floored. Like, my friend had the opportunity to see himself time and time again on the television screen as a white guy. And in comparison, I was constantly starved for relatable content for characters growing up. My single mom always told me, like, in no like short terms, that like I would have to work twice as hard to attempt to be viewed in the same light as someone as him. And even then, that would not be enough. And so I was silent in answering him, but now I feel like properly. It's that like I and countless others, us on this panel, care about the topic of realistic diversity and inclusivity, because if we do not, nothing in the industry will ever change. And it needs to be changed. And that's what drives me. That is why I write. That's why I write for Young Maya, as I said before. And so I always try to strive to remember that as I keep moving forward in this industry, which I am so grateful for. And on a positive spin of it, I'll never forget when I was a writer's PA, a writer in my first writer's room, who was a fellow Black woman, she offered to pay for all of my application fees for script competitions. And she told me, and I was like, how can I pay you back? And she told me, you can do this for another Black girl in a couple of years once you get staff and once you make it and once you're on my level. And I could actually cry thinking about it now.
I'm crying.
But
that's like the most beautiful thing.
And so that's how I always look at things is I'm finally starting to get into a seat at the table. And the thing is, I want to make more chairs for everyone to join me at the table. And that's why I do what I do and why I love it so much. And maybe that didn't even answer you guys' question.
No,
but,
it's the best answer.
You absolutely did. That's great.
We're all about to cry over here. Like,
I could cry thinking about it. I would just talk to her yesterday, so it's great. We're still in contact, and now I'm like, wait, wow, I can maybe our PA maybe needs some to apply for a contest, and I can be like, let me just cover it for you. Like that's just like the stuff I want to do to help promote all of us moving forward.
You know, Maya, I'm a white woman, and I have been. I've had watershed moments where I have been the only woman in a room, regardless of my race, the only woman. And it's all been men and all white men. And there was one in particular when I was interning for my mentor that I went to his production meeting for his show with Sidney Lumet. And I was one of 2 women in that room. And I was just an intern. And it was shocking. And that was a watershed moment. And I just want to say to you that every PA and writer's assistant, when I'm on staff, I want to read their material because they're hidden gems. They're hidden talents for us as a staff. So this sounds like you found a really great angel in your life, you know? So how about you, Kate? Do you have anything to say on this?
That was amazing, Maya. I'm trying to think of like a personal watershed moment. In the industry, not like anything. I've been very fortunate, and I haven't run into anything directly like that. But I think somewhere in college, when I was writing and turning in things, I think one time I got a comment. It was a compliment, sort of back in when they were like, "This is great. You know, you write like a guy." You know, and I think they meant that as like, yeah. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I can tell you. They were like, hey, that's really good. But I was like, what is that supposed to mean? And it was like just sort of highlighting how the difference of like what people see on the page versus how they look at me and how I'm perceived by other people, even though I don't really tend to think of myself as any different as anyone else in the room. But yeah, the optics are a lot of times I am the only woman in a room or the only Asian person in a room, you know, and so for me, I just try to like see how can I sort of avoid that tokenism in my writing. And I feel like Hollywood's really been great at pushing it in the last few years of just like, don't just have one woman, you know, in a show or in a movie or one Black person or one Asian, like have multiples. Like it's not going to blow anyone's mind if there's not any white people in a movie or in a TV show. Like it's totally normal. We see it all the time. It's cool. People are people. And it takes the pressure off, like you said, Liz, of having that person have to be like, represent all the Asian people all over the world, you know, and then suddenly that character can't do or say anything or have a flaw, you know? So just sort of bringing the diversity onto the page, into the story, and just embracing it and letting people be people.
Great. Mercedes.
Well, this is tough. But I was trying to think of a story, but then just a rep story popped in my head because that's where I go nowadays. No, but it was an old rep of mine, and it kind of blew my mind a little bit. He's telling me how he pitches me to people, and he's like, she does this, she does that, and she writes just as good as the white guys. But and I was like, wait, what? Is that the gold standard? A white guy is like that's, and I didn't even say anything because I didn't even know what to do with that information. Like that, I guess it's a compliment. Yes, thank you, but I'm sure they're not the only people in Hollywood who can write well. So I just think how I do check off a lot of boxes, and I understand that. But I just look forward for the day when it's just like, oh, they like my sample and they like my background and my personality. And that's why I'm here, not just because like that also a quota or, you know, like just, it's something I strive to. And I think because of George Floyd and everything going on, there's more, the call to action to Hollywood, right? For more writers of color. And I'm getting more meetings because of that. And even the racial police meetings, like, hey, we had no people of color developing this thing. And we realized, oh, now that everyone's complaining about stuff, we need someone to make sure it's not racist. And I'm getting a lot more of those, which I'm like, why didn't you go to people of color in the first place? Like that.
Yeah.
That's another issue, but yeah, it's an interesting
Big
time.
No, that's a big issue. Why didn't they go in the first place? I'm always shocked by that. I have a pilot that shoots in India. The characters aren't Indian, but it shoots in India. And one of the questions from the people buying it was, how are you going to make this authentic? I'm already talking to Geetika Lazardi. Like, I'm already talking to Indian writers to bring them on. Like, I would never do this without an Indian writer. I would never do a show set in any country without somebody representing or with knowledge of that. So yeah, why don't executives, why doesn't the system pre-think these things out?
Yeah, and I think some of it is like writers hire writers, but also writers often hire their friends. And if you don't have a very inclusive friend group, you might not notice. And I had somebody asked me that question recently. It was sort of like, how could you possibly, where it's like, everything is moving quickly, in Hollywood, like you have to staff a show really, really fast, right? So some people are just calling friends and pulling people in, but they're not necessarily thinking about the makeup of that room. And so as a person who's been the only of a lot of things, the only woman, the only person under the age of 50, the only person who's a person of color, like it's a weird space. And Maya, I think you brought it up. It's like, and I think Kate, you did too. It's like, it's really nice to not be the only one, where there's other people of color, there are other women in the room, there's other people to take things. There are people from underrepresented groups, and there are people we forget, right? We forget about older writers. We forget about writers with disabilities. We forget about Native American writers. There's so many, this world we live in is so multicultural. I really wish writers' rooms could reflect the world we live in, so that then the characters can reflect that. And Liz, you had a really great story yesterday where we were talking about, when you get to these positions of power and like when you get to be showrunner, the kinds of decisions you have to make. And I think you can maybe talk a little bit about that and just sort of the positive side of this spin of like, change is coming right now. What are your point of views as a woman who's about to be a showrunner on maybe hopefully 2 shows? How are you viewing that? And then, we can talk to the bigger group about sort of those sort of issues of now that things are changing. What do you want to change?
I think that's a great question. I'm when I got to Dead to Me, I witnessed probably the best showrunner I've worked for. She's a gay woman, and the staff was primarily women, but it was it's been such a positive experience. And I want to take that, bottle it, and make that how all the rooms, all my staffs function, because there's no reason for somebody to feel unheard, less than, not valued. And the business has changed. I think Bianca and I were talking about this yesterday. The business has really changed. I think when people were writing, and it's not a knock on Mannix, but like when people were writing much more straight up procedural or, plot driven shows, you could be the writer that could just plug in and do it and do your 36 scripts a year or whatever. But now we're doing this nuanced writing. I'll look at each one of us on this panel has a different voice and a different superpower. And it's like, I want to staff and give opportunities to the best writers, regardless of like level, regardless of color, gender. I just want the voice that I need to fill my orchestra. So, and I also feel like I will also have PAs and writer's assistants sitting in the room, always.
I love that.
They need to be there. So, yeah.
You said a cool thing about superpowers and just sort of understanding that when we're in these spaces that like sometimes you have skills that will make you stand out. Some people have great handwriting. I do not. Who are the board people, or they're the people who do whatever. Do people have superpowers? Have you honed them? How you've done your craft? How do you think about that when you try to stand out in a positive way in these rooms?
I feel like that's a hard question to answer, because it's like, look how amazing I am, I feel like is what I'm gonna say. But
to your horn,
I guess I can
Maya,
I can say I can say confidently that I have an incredibly strong work ethic, as a staff writer, I see it as my job to kind of make things easier on our showrunner and all the writers above me. I don't mind going the extra mile to do so. I think that comes from being an assistant for years, and having that kind of mindset has given me an understanding of the environment and what ways I can be the most helpful. I think that paired with, I have a very positive, upbeat kind of attitude. And usually they always call me the glue. So I'm like, we're gonna get along and we're gonna have a great time. It's like my vibe. So hopefully that's proven me to be a person who you want to spend 60 hours a week with.
Awesome.
It's
Kate?
a great nickname. The glue.
The glue. That's a
that's
superhero.
Sorry, the question was superpowers, right? Or
yeah, do you have in-room stuff that you know, or interview stuff that like helps you stand out of the crowd?
Let's see. I hope superpower, sense of humor. I think never underestimate a good sense of humor and just getting along. You know, as Maya said, I'm just like, hey guys, we're all gonna have a great time. Let's make this a fun hour or fun 12 hours, whatever. Especially when things go wrong, it helps to have a sense of humor. Things are gonna go wrong. Everyone's gonna get really pissy. So if you can kind of crack a joke and just roll with it and just get through it, it's definitely helps everyone relax a little bit. And the other thing, I had another one, I just forgot it. I'm forgetful. That's definitely one of my superpowers. I'll have to think of that and come back to me.
I mean, but I'm just thinking about how little time we have left, and is there anything that we need to talk about? Like, you know, it's just television is one of those things that there's no one right way to do it, right? There just isn't. There's so many different writers and there's so many different places to go now and be employed. But I'm not sure how to wrap this up, Bianca.
I would just say quick lightning round. If there was one thing you could have told your younger self who was getting into the business, just one, throw it out there. We'll go from Kate to Maya to Mercedes, and then Liz, and then there'll be me, and we'll just wrap it out that way. Let's see if we can just really, really quickly, there's one cool thing that people could maybe try.
Okay, mine's not cool, but writing groups. Be in as many writing groups as you can. Do it. It's great practice for when you land in a TV room. Get in as many as you can.
Amen.
I agree with that, but also I say never compromise who you are as a writer for the benefit of anyone else. Your right fit is out there, be it with finding reps or being in a writer's room, so stay true to yourself.
And I think don't be afraid to ask for help, and also ask a lot of questions.
I was going to say what Mercedes said. Yes, ask for help. Ask people who are better than you are to read your work. Ask them and don't blindly take their notes, but listen and then ask questions. But I also agree with the writers group. You know, make your own material. Make a movie. Put your work out there. Self-produce.
Oh my gosh, I love all of these things, and I would only add think outside of the box, right? Try do things that you don't think you'll ever do. I wrote a dramedy this year because I was like, I don't really do comedy. Let's try it. And just to see if you can do it and really just push yourself to push outside of your comfort zone really helps you know yourself even more, and don't put yourself in a box because people will try that anyways. So I'm yes to the writers groups. I'm yes to all these other amazing things. But mostly I love this, that we're sitting here, we're chatting. You know, I knew a couple of these ladies, but there are ladies here I did not know. Other artists are what are going to feed you, and people are going through things that you might be going through. So finding a good, healthy group, a cohort to hang out with who aren't going to like kill your soul is also a last minute sort of thing that you could all do, no matter where you are in the country, no matter if you're in LA, if you're writing or not writing right now. Those are all things we can do. So thank you again for being with us, for becoming a successful writer in a crowded landscape. That's the name. So we did this in conjunction with Afro Comic Con for their virtual 2020 event. So we are so happy that you joined us. And please remember to consider donating to the AFCC Moonshot Junior program that funds young girls of color to go through a 12-month program where they will learn tech skills, innovation, product development, and entrepreneurship. And if you please click on the donation link, any amount will help. And there'll be more information on the Afro Comic Con website. Thank you, Mercedes. Thank you, Maya. Thank you, Kate. Thank you, Liz.
Thank you.
Anything else?
No, I just want to thank everyone. You guys were great. And, you know, it's been a pleasure to spend an hour with you.
Great. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
It was fun. Thank you.
Yeah, it was so fun. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.